Okay, guys, I'm so excited to have everybody here. The purpose really of this video was to get a panel going. Obviously, everybody here is a thought leader in the space of wellness and health. And we have a lot of different personalities and different perspectives here. So we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on in the world with the pandemic, stress management techniques, consciousness, and just different ways that we can all really harness and leverage self-development to get us through some of these tougher times. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce my first panelist, Scott Nicholson. Scott, maybe you could tell us a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and what you do.
Sure, Sheri. First of all, thanks so much for the opportunity to be here with everybody. It's really a pleasure. So my career is best described as a serial entrepreneur, so to speak. For about 20 years, I founded, owned, and operated two large consumer products companies in the consumer product world, primarily housewares, kitchen gadgets, things of that nature. And I did that for most of my life through 2017. So I really have, I have my job and I have my work. So my job, aside from being an entrepreneur, right now I'm the president of one of the largest consumer products companies that supplies the casino industry. The name of that company is the Gander Group. That's my job, and my work is the thing that I have a lot of passion for, the thing that I feel like I have my special gifts, which is I'm a corporate culture enhancement specialist / motivational speaker. So I go into corporations and I educate them and train them on how to create team harmony within their cultures, how to make the baby boomers get along with the millennials, and those types of things. And I also speak at corporations in the area of personal self-development. So those are the areas that I truly love. That, you know, they say you got to love what you do. That's what I love what I do, but I like my job too, because that's the paycheck's a little bit bigger for that. So that's a little bit about myself. I live in Nesconset, New York, which is part of Smithtown. And I've got 18-year-old triplets that don't know what to do with themselves at home right now. So,
Well, I love it. I love it. Thank you, Scott, for that intro. And then I'd love to speak with Nicole Teitler. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself as well.
Sure. Well, hi, everyone. So I'm Nicole Teitler, and I go by also the trademarked byline Nikki on the Daily, which is a overall, so I guess let's tap into what do I do for a living and what do I do for a passion? Sadly, they are both. So I am a lifestyle and news reporter full-time. So right now my days are busier than ever. But on the side, I also have, in addition to what I do daily, I'm also right now, I have a weekly fitness and wellness column. And pretty much my target is, I also consider myself a master networker because I've been in New York City, New York State, East End, in the Hamptons my entire life. And I pride myself pretty much on my connections, ranging from the top CEOs that I've interviewed down to my favorite bartender at my favorite Manhattan bar, making my favorite cocktails. So pretty much what I do is I go out, I get people's stories, and I pride myself on being the master storyteller.
I love it. I love it. And where are you from, Nick?
I don't really know. New York. I just like saying New York State because I'm in the process of, I pretty much bounce between Nassau County, Hoboken, and Jersey City, and about a third of my time is easily spent out in probably like Southampton.
Yeah, amazing. Well, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
And now Dr. Zachary Berk, thanks for being here. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Okay. And also thank you, Sheri, for inviting me to be part of this. Really appreciate it. So right now, I'm a teacher of meditation. That's what I do, and I'm fully committed to that. On my professional side, I was an eye doctor for about 10 years, practiced for 10 years, and then became a venture capitalist in healthcare. I did that for a little over 30 years, and I started many companies. I even started an insurance company. I didn't know much about insurance, but ended up being the key architect of the healthcare savings account, the HSAs. So that was quite a trip. But really, at the core, like Scott was talking about, there was sort of split between the professional life and for me, it was my spiritual life. And so I had an awakening when I was 19. It was pretty profound. And so for the rest of my life, for the last 50 or so years, I've been trying to find ways in which to help people have similar experiences like what I had. And so what I have right now is an app that's on Apple Play or App Store and Google Play. And it's, you know, a way for people to experience enlightenment. I know that's a big claim, but I've been beta testing it long enough, and I strongly believe that. And so where am I right now? I'm in New Haven, Connecticut, and I can't match Scott's triplets who are 18, but my twins are 21, and they're the youngest of my group of 6. So anyway, that's a little bit about my background, where I'm at today.
Love it. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Zach. And then we have Molly Wentzel. Hello, Molly. Tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're from.
Sure. Yes. Thank you so much for this. This is amazing already. But so I'm a trauma coach and an energy healer. So basically, I started out just kind of bouncing from job to job, really working hard, trying to find a place to call home. And every place I found just turned out to be not what they advertised it, right? So I came to entrepreneurship by realizing I'm only going to be happy by working for myself. So I went to Bali, became a Reiki master. Then I learned how to be a coach. And so I got to trauma coaching just through my own experiences, my own life, myself, my friends, my family. And it was just a natural fit that so many people have experienced trauma. Every human has experienced trauma. But I focus on healing sexual trauma because that is such a huge problem, really, really prevalent, mostly for women, obviously some men as well. But basically, I just spend my time helping them see the truth of themselves, and that, you know, basically peeling back all of those layers that trauma kind of grows around your heart, you know, the bitterness, the sadness, the depression, that if you don't realize it's stemming from trauma, you could just go into self-destruction trying to figure it out and thinking you're a failure and there's something wrong with you. So that's what I get to do all day. It's an amazing thing, super heavy sometimes, but very necessary. So that's what I do. I'm also currently writing a book on the topic that's going to come out later this year. So just really looking forward to helping people see the truth that, you know, trauma is everywhere. Little things can be trauma, big things can be trauma, and it's okay. And you have to acknowledge it and feel it in order to release it. So that's what I get to do all day.
Amazing. Well, thank you for sharing that, Mal. And then my beautiful Sonya Mujeeb, maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Hi, everyone, and thank you so much, Sheri, for having this panel. Well, I started my journey long ago, and really it accelerated after I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's. And after that, you know, my background, I was in real estate in San Francisco, California. Always very intuitive, very inquisitive, always just connected, but lost my way. And after I started to work with a spiritual life coach in Berkeley, California, things just started opening up, and with timeline therapy and all kinds of things. And I started learning psychic development, and it just was no stopping. And after a neck injury, I actually had a massive awakening. And that awakening led me down to dark night of the soul and 9 months of worlds opening up and having communication with all kinds of magnificent, you know, just beings. And I actually, before all of this, I looked up at the ceiling, and it was this request that I had made with the universe. It was a very clear intention. And I will never forget this, because I said, God, I just want to help people. And so what I've been doing since then, since acclimating, coming back into my body, grounding, learning energy, learning how to just be again, right? Be in my body again. So I do intuitive health coaching, transformational coaching. I teach people how to navigate ascension, awakenings, often very dark awakenings like I've had. And yeah, so that's a little bit about what I do, and also teach people the purification process so they can start to access their own abilities and run with whatever they're here to do.
Amazing. And where are you located?
I'm in Atlanta, Georgia now, and I moved from the Bay Area, California in 2016, and I love it here.
Amazing. All right. So now that we've gotten all introductions out of the way, I can't thank you guys all enough for that. I'd love to start off the conversation back with Scott to learn, a little bit about everything going on in the world. There's so much chaos. I mean, the Labor Department came out with the jobless claims and over 3 million claims in 1 week around the United States. There's a lot of fear. Scott, for you, what are you doing to stay grounded, and what might be some advice you'd offer people who are trying to cope with this type of chaos going on?
Yeah, thanks for the question. For me, there's really been two essential areas that I've built a lot of strength and faith in. Being in executive management and being a father. The first thing is, there's always going to be crisis in life, right? So I think as an individual, you need to always be prepared for it. But I think it's most important to be prepared for it from a mindset perspective. And I've really, over the last couple of years, have strengthened my ability to reprogram and renew my thinking. There's a saying that I really love, and it's, what lies behind you and what lies before you is minuscule to what's within your mind, what lies within your mind. And, life is fought on the battlefield of the mind. This is where the war is won and lost. Your mind is the most, everything starts with your mind, everything, and it ends with your thoughts. Your mind will steer you and control your path through all of your emotions, your feelings, your thoughts. So, and you have the choice over how you manage and control, your thinking. I've chosen to make sure that in every moment of the day, I'm putting my mindset in a place where it's optimistic. I live a life of expectancy. I expect that even during difficult times, I'm expecting good things to happen. I'm expecting good people to come into my life, and that has been really rewarding, for me. Human achievement in the external world is made possible by human achievement in the internal world. So I think when people can get control over their thinking and know that they can wake up every morning and choose to be depressed and concerned and fearful, okay, and kind of cower in the corner, or they can get up even during times of crisis, feeling like, what, as bad as things are today, this too will pass. And this is all going to pass for us. We all know that. It may get a little bit worse, but it's going to pass. It's like a season. Life is seasons. And we know one thing for sure, that after every winter season, we know no matter how bad the winter is, spring is going to come. And that's kind of how I pursue this. My company in California, we had calls this morning, and we were talking about who we were going to be furloughing and who we were going to be leaving. And the CEO of my company was crying on the call today. It was a very, very difficult morning today. And I think he furloughed about 20 people. And the last thing, everyone kind of hung up the virtual call, and I told him, I said, this too will pass, okay? The last thing I'll just add to that is, my strength and my faith in God over the last 5 years has really defined who I am. And I think the fact that I put all of my life in God's hands, and I have this peace that even when things are tough, I know that it's for a greater good. I know that things are going to be okay because he promised us that. He promised us that if we put our life in his hands, he's going to take care of his children and he'll bring us light. So, and I think that allows me to have the strength in the mindset as well. So they kind of play off one another.
So powerful. And adding on to that, I'd love to kick the ball over to Dr. Zach, being that you are a specialist with meditation and you've got the Journey app pretty much to enlightenment. Maybe you can touch on that as well, with similar to what Scott was mentioning, like how do you stay calm and cope with so much chaos going on in the world, Dr. Zach? What's that look like for you?
Well, I think what's very important, it's sort of defined in the mindfulness definition of being in the moment, that really at the core of our struggles is the illusionary ego mind that was developed, to protect us, to separate us and see where our boundaries are, and say I'm me, quote, I'm me, and I need to protect myself and guide myself through my day and my life. However, the ego mind sort of ended up confusing us and making us feel that it's who we really are. And the ego mind is based on fear. And the ego mind is incredibly active right now because we're just such a fearful time. However, there's a great thing about our reality, which is we have a higher self, which is incredible. And it's based on love. And, it's a process of beginning to allow our higher self to become realized. And that's really how I define the enlightenment process, is being able to bring that higher self, our true selves, to life and allow our ego mind to become more of a servant rather than a master. Because right now, for most of us, it's our ego mind that's our master. And that's why we're so fearful. And that's why we also spend most of our time in the past regretting or hoping for something in the future. Because at the basic essence is that the ego mind cannot survive in the present moment. Because the present moment is the truth. That's the reality. And the ego mind is really an illusion. It can't exist in the light of the moment. So once we understand that, we need to establish a discipline. And that discipline takes practice. And that's where meditation comes in. It's a practice. Right now I sort of use the analogy of the Stradivarius violin. The most famous, supposedly the greatest violin with the greatest sound. Of course, some of them sell for millions of dollars. But if I handed you a Stradivarius and you never practiced playing a violin, what are you going to do with that? You're going to pluck on the strings and create almost no music. So it's the same thing with our higher mind. It's a Stradivarius. We all have Stradivariuses, not only in our brain, but there's a lot of facts and theories and beliefs that our mind is really outside of our actual brain, that it's not physically located just in our heads, but it's the spirit and the consciousness is really beyond our bodies. And so it's really important that we get in touch with these realities and learn to practice how to play our higher self. And that's where the meditation program that I've developed is all about learning to practice the higher self so that it can be realized and be experienced, not only just in a moment, but as throughout the day as much as possible. Because, as Eckhart Tolle, who's I think one of the greatest spiritual teachers we've ever had, talks about how the ego mind has a sense of self which wants to pull you out of the present moment all the time. So it's a struggle, and that's where practice comes in, that we have to practice being in the present moment, connect with our breath so that we can, it's probably the best anchor for being in the present moment, become centered, and then develop tools through guided meditations or whatever meditation program you have to be able to get yourself together and deal with all this fear and all this chaos.
Mm. Oh, I love where you talk about the ego mind. I think of it like a small separated sense of self. And I remember reading A Course in Miracles where they talk about how God dwells in the present moment and how when we take our focus off of the present moment, it is like the ego's playground and it can show us anything. And it just becomes so painful because we're no longer in our power. And I think this might be a good transition over to Molly. Molly, being that you do a lot of work with folks, and I know you and I had connected on this topic, very similar to what Dr. Zach was talking about, being present. But what happens when you become so present and you're trying to acknowledge feelings, but they're so overwhelming? You're scared, you're frustrated, you're feeling rage, whatever type of emotion might come up. For you, Molly, what would you offer the person that might be experiencing some of that fear? And what are some steps that you've been personally taking to stay grounded? And what might you offer that person that's also looking for some tools and techniques?
Absolutely, yes. So I really identified in my past as being super disempowered. Anybody could have my time, my energy. They could take anything from me and I would just give it away, right? And that's often because I was very disconnected from who I am, what my body was feeling. So what I've learned to do over time is to reconnect with my body. And that's how I can ground in this present moment. And that's how I can understand what's going on with myself internally. So I've spent my life up in the clouds in my head, completely disconnected. And I thought that was actually almost a good thing, because then I'm always looking for, my next step, my next thought. I thought I was actually like ahead of the curve, but in reality, I was really only like 25% of myself. So now what I do is I check in with my body. If I'm feeling upset, if I'm feeling fearful, if I'm noticing that my shoulders are tense and up to here, I start checking in and feeling, okay, why are my shoulders so tense? Why am I feeling fear? And then I just give myself some space to actually dig into that. Like, okay, I had a great day, but somehow I'm still anxious. Oh, that's because my boss was overwhelming. Or I just kind of put the pieces together. I give myself the space to actually figure out what's going on. And you're absolutely right. When people start getting into, dealing with their problems, their challenges, their past trauma, past hurt and pain, it can be extremely overwhelming. We run from these things. We try our best to avoid this pain. So when we actually stop running, that can make us go 10 steps backwards if we don't have the right support. So number one, always check in with your body. It's always going to give you the information you need. It's always going to tell you where you need to focus. Your body has a lot of wisdom that our culture doesn't really teach us. So check in with your body for sure. Also make sure that you have someone you can talk to. And if you don't have someone you can talk to, have a journal where you can just journal out all of these emotions and have the journal hold those energies and hold those emotions. That way your body can relax for a little bit. But I would highly recommend having somebody, whether it's a partner, a friend, a family member. I would say more importantly would be a professional. That way they know how to soothe you down. They know how to speak to you and talk to you with an informed mind, rather than just saying things with good intentions, but hurting you in the process. But also it's super important to get outside. We're all kind of stuck in our homes. We're all kind of dealing with this new way of being. So if you can, like a day like today is beautiful. Get outside, even if it's just for 5 minutes. You need to almost reframe your existence, because fear, trauma, betrayal, pain, it can completely change your perception about who you are, where your life is going, and you can feel very stuck. So if you can change that perception by getting outside and seeing the great big world, or reading a book you haven't before, breaking up your routine in some way, giving you a broader perspective and reminding you that this pain is temporary, like Scott was saying, everything is a season. So even if you are completely overwhelmed with fear, changing that perspective will remind you, you've been through terrifying situations. You've been through uncertainty of, finances and your job and even connections. You've been through trauma before and you've made it out of all of those situations okay. So really just check in with yourself, change that perspective, and get outside and have somebody to rely on for sure.
I love that. Such great advice. And it makes me think of how so many people might feel distanced right now, and just we're all quarantined, but it's a beautiful because technology can bring us together. Yet there's a lack of physical touch and a lack of social connection, like human to human, that I feel like a lot of us yearn and crave for. I think I'll pass the conversation over to Nikki. Based on what you've been seeing, Nick, and based on what how are you staying grounded? I know I was with you when it was really starting to get pretty bad out in New York, Nick. So for you, I'd love to learn, how have you been able to stay grounded, and what might you recommend for other people that are facing layoffs, that are not sure what their life's going to look like tomorrow, and they're really feeling scared?
Well, one thing I can certainly say is that, so obviously you and I got together the Sunday before New York went into lockdown. And that interaction, I'm sure many of us kind of dealt with that situation where they were out with somebody that Sunday here in New York. It saved me in so many ways, just knowing that I was with one of my closest friends, and, it could be friends, family member, whatever, whoever you were with. Having that interaction and going back to that constantly, I feel like is so important. And then doing chats like these. But on my side, being a news outlet, and I'm actually considered a first responder. So technically, if we do have to quarantine and there's, police on our streets, I don't have to listen to them, because technically it's my job to go out of my house. So, but what I'm hearing a lot of stories right now of people who are getting laid off and they're nervous, or they're working from home and they don't know how to deal with it. I've been working remotely for 2 years. I only recently started going on to things like Eventbrite and networking events and trying to get myself out of my house. So for me, it's very ironic how I was finally starting to socialize, and now the world is like, no, you got to stay where you are. So my advice to everyone else who is going through this right now, if you're not used to kind of being alone, or you're not used to being in your house, I've been doing it for 2 years, picking up a book, going outside is so important, like Molly said, and, touching back on what Scott said about it's a season, everything's going to come and go. What I'm finding the hardest thing is right now is the present right now for me is completely fine. It's thinking about the future in the sense of, before all this happened, I was ready for that next career jump. I was ready to move. I was preparing my finances to, move in and closer to my significant other. I was preparing a future that, as many of us are, and that's so relatable to think how many of us were planning for 6 months down the road, a year down the road, and it was so tangible, and that disappeared. So my steps right now have been really tuning back into, well, we've been like, tuning back what Tamale said. We've been through something before. We've been through a trauma. And for me personally, in touching on my own trauma, is I suffer from panic disorder, and I'm very outward about it. And I'm very vocal in telling people it's gone for 6 months, and then I randomly get it. So when I heard the CDC say that it's a shortness of breath is a problem and you could be considered for COVID-19, you can imagine what my response was. But I think right now we really have to tune into, touching on what Zachary said, what our mind is telling us. Staying as grounded and present, and going through the breathing techniques of, it's going to be okay, and you're not alone. So if you're laid off, but you don't know anyone in your immediate family who is, guarantee you your friends, brothers, fiance, something like that is. And in doing these sort of chats and reaching out to others, it really is such a platform for all of us to really feel that connectedness to complete strangers. And I'm blessed because I get to tell the stories of people who are either struggling but thriving from it, or struggling and feel like they're sinking. And I get to connect them with other people. And what you're doing right now, I think, is a tremendous help for everyone.
I appreciate that insight, Nick. So great to hear. And now Sonya, I'd love to learn, energetically, so much energy going around. So for folks that want to feel more grounded and looking at self-care, I mean, what we don't know here is that I follow Sonya on Facebook, and you put out so many videos, like so much value constantly. I'd love to learn from you and hear how you're practicing self-care and what's worked for you throughout all of this chaos, and even what's working for your clients.
Can you hear me, Sheri? Perfect. Thank you so much. So I definitely feel self-care is number one, right? And what I start my clients with, what I do myself, number one is, what are we feeding ourselves, right? What are we consuming? What are we putting inside our bodies? Food is medicine, food is information, and it's really just, that's number one. And then what are we consuming in the media, right? So every morning I wake up and I tune in energetically, and some days I'm feeling really heavy, some days it's like la 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 the next day. And you know, again, for me personally, 4 years of being in Atlanta, this is my life. I work from home, and it's like I leave for errands, I leave to do certain things, or I go to nature every day. Again, another self-care tool. Every day I'm posting videos and pictures and really seeing what nature is doing, right? Really looking, like right now it's spring, looking at the blossoms, the flowers, really that energy from the elements, and knowing that there's a massive shift going on, you know, where all this stuff is coming out from underneath. We're collectively feeling the fear. We're collectively feeling anger, frustration. But when we tune in back into nature and look at, for instance, yesterday I was out and I'm looking at the cherry blossoms, and I'm looking at certain trees that are budding, and I'm like, everything's okay, because we have a choice, right? We always have to understand that we have a choice. We can tune into what feeds us, what nourishes us, or what's going to help, or what's going to take away from that. So for instance, yesterday there was information that I consumed, and then I had to go to the grocery store, and that information was still lingering in my field. And so when I was going to the grocery store, I felt like I'm going into a war zone. Like everything is virusy and and that's a choice. So I had to plug out of that, come back into center, come back into trust, understand that there's a bigger purpose. We all signed up for it, and that eventually it will be okay. We just have to ride it, again, with faith, you know, with meditation practices, self-care as best as we can. I think we're all doing the best that we can, and then helping others to do the same, you know, picking them up and teaching them. I feel like all the tools that we've collectively learned, this is why we need them. This is such an important moment for us to share, whether it's EFT tapping, mindfulness, journal, different energy techniques. It's all just for this grand moment. So I'm very excited for now and the future.
Yeah. I could totally resonate with that in terms of just being, and I'm sure we all can resonate with having so much gratitude for these practices that we've learned. And chances are we've gone through some type of experience in our life where it brought us closer to faith, or it brought us closer to this awareness that we're not just this body, that we're so much more, and that there is just such a higher power out there that's protecting us. And just like Dr. Zach had talked about, with meditation and being able to reach that place within ourselves, there are resources, like there's apps and there's books. And I love where, Sonya, you talk about something as simple as nature and how spiritually reassuring nature is when you just look at the fact that it's so rooted, and that, you know, the storms might come, but, you know, our branches might sway in the wind, but we're not gonna die. We're not going to leave here. We're rooted. And as long as we can stay grounded and keep that consciousness, I think this is where I'd love to wrap us up, is the mindset. So maybe my last question for us all is, what are you thinking about right now? Like, what is on your mindset and what's your focus? Let's start with Scott.
It's funny because I wanted to say something, and you played right into it. I think there's a word that I was thinking about now, and I know this, not that I wasn't thinking about it, but it came to me when you mentioned what you just said, and it's thankful perspective. And what I mean by that is, I guess the best way for me to explain it was, I was at Costco last week, as I mentioned earlier, and I was online, and there was a woman, an elderly woman, she was about 70 years old, and she seemed to be very happy. She was kind of laughing, you know, with another person, and I happened to make a comment. I said, "Oh, you look happy. How are you happy during this rough time?" And she went on to tell me a story that she was a young girl in Britain in World War II. And when Germany was bombing Britain, she was running through the streets without any shoes, dodging the bombs, trying to find her brother, her young little brother, who was that was killed actually during the bombings. And she said to me, she's like, if I could make it through that, she said, this is a piece of cake. And it's really started to get me thinking about perspective. You know, I know people that, you know, that are going through some rough times with cancer, and things that are, you know, devastating. And for those of us that don't have those types of tragedies going on in our life, I think there's a level of thankfulness that we can bring into this, or a silver lining that says, as bad as things are, you know what? I've got my family, I've got my children, I've got my health, I've got my mind, I have food on the table. And again, this will pass. And it actually starts to make me feel optimistic and positive, you know, in a way. So perspective is really important. And the last thing I will say is, I've had moments that I would call priceless with my family. And what I mean by that is my young kids, you know, social media and going out with friends and all this kind of stuff. But over the last couple of nights, I have played more Trouble and more Connect Four and backgammon, and I'm in my basement and I'm working out with my kids, which these things would have never happened in a million years if we didn't have this situation. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to pull all the different silver linings out of a crisis. And the more silver linings that you can find and identify and bring into your life, you can literally build up your body, your mind, your thought process into a happy place. It is possible. But again, that all ties back to being able to manage your mind and control your mind and be able to pull all those things into your mind. So I'll leave it at that.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that, Scott. So happy for you to be here with us. And Nikki, what would be your focus? Like, what are you thinking about right now?
Well, right now I'm thinking about the book that I should be writing after reading Stephen King's tips on writing. So right now my focus, I'm kind of in like Scott's mentality. Although I don't have a family, I think what he just spoke about was fantastic about that family time. But I feel like this is really forcing me to sit down and write my book and do all the things that I've always wanted to do, because like I said, I don't leave home anyway. But now I think, you know, I haven't touched on spirituality the way everyone else has, but like I said, I was about to do all these things, and I literally feel like God said to me, no, like this is a sign to say to me, you have to sit down, you have to write your book, you need to stay put before you spend more money. And I'm looking at the positive light because it's actually making me connected to way more people. And I really see that the silver lining is, as long as I do my part and I stay home and I check in with everyone around me that I care about and reach out to new people who I feel like we could connect through each other. At the end of this, I think humanity is honestly going to be in a much better place. I think we're going to be maybe a little bit addicted to the internet, but beyond that, I think we're going to be appreciating the outdoors far more. I found one gray hair today. That's my first. So hopefully I don't find any more by the end of this. But until then, I guess just focusing on my book right now. So.
Amazing. Well, thanks for being with us, Nick.
Thank you.
And Dr. Zach, can you tell us a little bit about what are you thinking about? What's your focus right now?
Well, I was just thinking about Nikki's, comment about she's not that spiritual, but God spoke to her, and and actually that's sort of what this time period is all about, is that it forces us, struggle, there's a value in struggle, and talk about a reservoir of struggle that's being, amassed right now is just off the charts. So, I believe that there's going to be a spiritual awakening. I mean, there's been a building of spiritual awakening in this world. And, I was telling you earlier, Sheri, there was a study that was done that it's projected now that over 50% of companies in the United States, large companies, offering mindfulness and meditation as a benefit to their employees, and which is incredible. And now, meditation and offering those benefits to their employees and urging their employees to do that while they're at home and having Scott, like your CEO, you know, to urge your company and your CEOs of your companies that you control to do meditation, because it helps bring all the employees together in sort of a spiritual way. They're all doing, I mean, it's obviously on a voluntary program, but to be able to bring people together spiritually, not only just on the internet, you know, is incredibly important. And the challenge for each of us under this stress can sort of push us there. You know, I'll say one more thing. I was doing a meditation a couple of days ago, and you know, I woke up and as Sonya was talking about, I was going inside my body and you know, feeling my body, and no matter whatever was going on in my own meditation, it wasn't enough to calm me down. You know, the night before, I was just hearing about that poor Italian family in New Jersey who lost, you know, 4 people, and I think there's one other person that's still on in critical care. And so I went to sleep with that thought. And so, you know, you wake up in the morning and you're working through all this tension and stress. And so you wake up with that. So here I am meditating, trying to calm myself down. And I noticed just there was so much stress in my body I couldn't relieve through my normal meditation. But then I realized that most of that stress was in my diaphragm. And I never really, you know, I've done so much breath awareness in my life, but I realized that so much of that stress was the diaphragm. That muscle was just quivering away, you know, trying to relax and tension, and it's just like a nervous wreck, that doggone muscle, you know. So what I ended up doing was, when I breathed in, I just allowed the breath just to fill up my whole abdomen, so that it would stretch out my abdomen, I mean my diaphragmatic muscle, and then tense it up. So I was doing like, you know, an exercise for the diaphragm, like isometrics. You know, it was isometrics on my diaphragm. And I did that for just a few minutes. And all of a sudden, my body went just completely relaxed. I was able to finish my meditation and then feel like my head was screwed on straight for the rest of the day. Thank goodness. You know.
I love that. It's so powerful when you can move energy through your body, through your breath, and bring that consciousness and the power of meditation, like you mentioned, Dr. Zach. So powerful. Thank you for that. And Molly, what are you thinking about and what are you focused on right now?
Sure, yes. So I'm actually focusing on self-pride and self-appreciation, which I kind of used to shy away from, but I just seeing how I've set myself up to ride out this crazy shift, it just makes me really appreciate myself. And I think that's important for people to do. Because my whole past, I was very disempowered. I didn't take responsibility. I didn't do any of the work to get what I wanted. So I blamed everything else, but I never actually did the work. So now that I do the work, I sit down and I meditate, I sit down and I journal, I sit down and I make different choices. I eat better food, I exercise more. I took responsibility for myself, but not even just those actions. I trusted my gut. Right. So, and even if it didn't make sense, so I set myself up with a job that I didn't necessarily fit right with. At the time, it didn't seem to make much sense, but now it's remote. I've been working remotely since August, making the same money. And so that's something that I'm very, very proud of and appreciative of, that I followed my gut to take this job that didn't really make much sense for me. I think I told you before, I used to be a kickboxing instructor and I left that job and I was really trying to get back into a studio and nothing was working out. And I was very frustrated. I was trying to force it. And one day I was just like, you know what? I'm going to buy my own bag. So I bought one. I have it now at my home. And a few months later, this whole virus starts striking. So now I am set up to work at home, to exercise at home. And just those are just 2 small examples that I can look back and say, I am so proud of myself for doing the work, and not just doing the work, but following the guidance that I received from my soul. So what you guys have been saying is God, I always like to say soul, my higher self, just because I've spent most of my life looking outward for help. And so now I've made it a point to make it that my soul is guiding me. So that gives me an extra kind of boost of self-appreciation. But yeah, so I'm just really focused on celebrating myself right now and giving myself permission to be proud and to celebrate and to really acknowledge all of the hard work that I've had to do. And not even just the work I've had to do, but how it has completely set me up to be at peace, to be okay, and to help others. So I'm focusing on just really celebrating myself, because then that builds up my excitement for the future. Like, okay, if I could prepare myself for this, I know that I'm going to be 100% okay in the future with anything I try to do, as long as I trust myself and keep caring for myself. So I just want everybody to be able to do that same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Just honoring. I think of it like an honoring practice for everybody, wherever we are. Like just honoring that we woke up today and we have air to breathe, that we've got fingers for some of us that have fingers, and eyeballs and a mouth. And we can communicate with this body, and how beautiful it is. So amazing, Molly. I'm so glad that you were here with us. And Sonya, what are you thinking about, and what has your focus right now?
Focus really is just to be in the present moment. My focus is to, again, I love what Molly said, just really appreciate the hard work that we've done. You know, the last 5 or 6 years, I've been nonstop, just learning, consuming information, learning techniques, being able to help others. And I think it's all just for this great purpose. And yeah, just being in meditation. Meditation has been just such an extraordinary tool for me, where I go very, very deep, and I can hear, really listen to what's going on, and the calling of my soul, and knowing many a times where this is all a grand play. This is all an illusion. You know, I've experienced times in meditation where I'm not this body. I'm just the awareness. So really tapping into the awareness of the present moment and being grateful for for anything that comes into our reality, to our existence, and also remembering what we feed, we're going to fuel. So being very mindful of the information that we all consume. And yeah, I'm just so excited to help the collective right now with everything I've learned. So thank you so much.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm just so grateful for every single teacher here. All of you are such wonderful teachers of consciousness and mindfulness, and just taking this approach of being prayerful and appreciative and grateful. I think that when we have that level of consciousness, it spreads. And when you think about what people are craving right now, it's that happiness and that peace and that security, and all of that can be found within ourselves right now. And I'm just so grateful for every single one of you for adding such incredible insight to the panel, and all of our viewers. It's just been so nice. If you'd like to reach out to any of the guests here, just know I'll have the information below. And that's it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you,
Thank you
Sheri.
very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.